record the chat and everything else.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Holly said it with this recording, it records the chat as well, which is very handy. I didn't realise that. We've got one person in. No, we haven't. There's 5 of us here now. I thought I saw someone in the waiting room. Do you want me to start letting people in now as they our person who logged on before has gone back off again? Never mind.
I think people were having a few technical difficulties this morning. Yeah, and if anything happens, if I accidentally black out or anything, it'll be just there's a glitch in the internet.
We won't call the ambulance in that case, Carley. Oh my God, she's gone down. Oh well, we'll just push on.
Yeah, just push on.
Steph was saying this morning I was sort of freezing a bit too. So here we go. You've got Skilling the Bay has come in, Carley.
Oh,
so
that'll be Lindy.
That'll be Lindy. All right, here we go. And I think that wind is probably, whatever the wind does to the internet, it's probably disturbed things this morning.
Yeah, we lost electricity at our house last night. There was 116 houses between our street and the next street that lost power. It wasn't a complete loss. It was kind of, the lights glowing. It was a bit weird.
Oh, that is weird. G'day, Lindy. How you going?
Hi, Bernadette. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Good to see you all again.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting how 12 months goes, doesn't it? Whoops.
Absolutely.
In a flash.
That's 12 months ago, Bernadette. Oh my goodness.
Pretty much. We were in the middle. I think I was, what are we now? The end of October. I'd just come back from America after going and, using Skilling the Bay as a reason to go and visit all of these people in New York and Boston.
You were lucky to get all of that in, Bernadette.
I was, wasn't I? It was, very lucky. And that learning community conference in Medicine was fantastic. I keep sort of thinking about some of the aspects, even just, the local mayor and his approach to the learning community. It was really, that was fabulous conference. And then to go and have a look at, try and have a look at the PTech in Boston and in New York, in Brooklyn, and then go up to Boston and talk to those guys was fantastic.
You were lucky. If it was planned for this year, Bernadette, what a different story.
Yeah, we'd be doing it like this, wouldn't we? And I wouldn't have the taxi driver in New York trying to convince me that actually where I went to in Boston to begin with wasn't, no, madam, you do not want to get out there. I ended up some back blocks of Boston. Oh, not Boston, Brooklyn. Sorry. Here comes Jude. I'm getting the two mixed up.
It's hard to imagine when we get to travel again, isn't it?
Yes, it really is.
If ever.
It's a bit sad.
I think there'll be international travel next year. Not to Europe or America, I don't think.
And it's a bit, my little grandson's other grandmother is in India. And so it's a bit sad from that point of view that you can't sort of like going back in time. Hello, Troy. How are you? Welcome.
Yeah, good, thanks.
That's good. G'day, Jude. Oop, not sure if Jude can hear me. Phil's on. Hello, Phil. How are you?
Hi, Phil.
And Yasmin's.
Very well, thank you.
Hello, Yasmin.
Hey, everyone. How are you?
Yasmin.
How are you, ladies?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. This is the only way I can get to see you, Carley. Hey?
I know, it's a bit busy, isn't it?
Oh, well, good luck. I won't distract you anymore. I'll just sit here quietly.
It's all right. I'll call on you in a minute, Yasmin.
Oh, no. Actually, I thought I might just see if I can just, delicately, sneak in a little bite to eat whilst I'm listening. I might have to hide myself here. It's me.
Okay, well, we've gone 1 o'clock, Clive and Carley. I can keep admitting people as we go along. Would you like to, do you think we should kick off?
Let's kick off. We won't ask Yasmin the first question then if she's still eating her lunch. So look, everybody, welcome to you today. My name is Clive Pugh. I'm joined by Carley Brennan today. I'm the well, my day job is the CEO of Winchester Australia Limited. You can see the Winchester sign in the background there. And we're a Geelong-based company in the wholesale distribution of firearms and ammunition. So just a bit different for us. But my other job is I'm also the chair of the committee for Geelong, and it's a great pleasure to be here as part of this event. So before I do the acknowledgement, Carley, do you want to just do a quick intro of yourself and then back to me?
Thanks, Clive. Yes, my name's Carley Brennan, and I manage a program based out of the Gordon called Skilling the Bay, and work in partnership with Deakin University and the Victorian government to look at, it's been a program to look at how we support education and skills for developing the future workforce. And I've worked with a number of people in the room over the journey.
No worries. Thanks, Carley. Well, our style will be informal but somewhat structured, so we'll see how we go. The Committee for Geelong and this event acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Australia's First Nations people and the traditional custodians of the land and waterways. We pay our respects to the Wadawurrung people of this land, their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to First Nations people here today. Welcome to you. Welcome to everybody else. Bernadette, our host, thank you for allowing us to be part of what is a really interesting program that's happening in Geelong. Well, not just Geelong, but happening across the web this week as we talk about the future of work. Look, the Future of Work Forum is part of the Committee for Geelong's strategic planning and discussions with different stakeholders working in this space is designed to help prepare workforces for the future. And we're really lucky to be joined in Geelong by some great partners working in this space, both the Gordon, Deakin University, G21, and really pleased to see Phil Honeywell online today, who leads Newcombe Secondary College and the leader of the PTech program in Geelong. The idea of this program this week is for us to explore the future of work and what we can learn and provide that as some sort of input into future, I guess, policy discussions and other discussions that organisations have. Our role at the committee is to provide input from an advocacy point of view, but we're increasingly also research, basing a lot of our work based on research, and we hope that we'll incorporate this in future research around looking at what people do. Our conversation topic today is around entry-level skills, upskilling, reskilling and building careers, perhaps never more relevant than the world we face ourselves in today. If we were to sit down 12 months ago and talk about this topic, I'm sure that we'd be talking different things to what we are today. And even as we speak, we're entering very uncertain times as to what the future economy looks like, what the future nature of work itself even looks like. And I'm sure there'll be much more discussion around what that looks like. Pretty simple, the ground rules for today. Look, stay on mute if you can, unless you're asking your questions. Please use the chat to post questions or comments. You may leave your video on if that's you so desire. And just for your information, we are recording this session today to republish on the web. So just so that you know about that. Righto, I'm going to head to Kylie now because she's going to set the scene.
Thanks, Clive. I'll try. I won't be singing any songs though. So yeah, I suppose in terms of setting the scene for the conversation today, we're really keen to get your contribution and your thoughts on the topic around skills at all levels and how we build careers. And I'd just really like to highlight some of or refer back to some of the points that were made in the opening remarks yesterday in the opening presentations, which were a great way to stimulate the conversations this week. So we heard from Russell Tytler and Peter wide around the 100 Jobs of the Future report released by Deakin, and we can pop the link up there in that. But they had some great observations around what, looking 30 years out, what the jobs of the future might look like. And I think we have one of the contributors to that report, Jude Walker, here today as well. So we'll be able to get your observations too. But really interestingly, it was the reduction of routine jobs during that time and the reduction of routine non-cognitive jobs over the time. That was a trend that was looked at. And the obvious one, the increase in human and technology interaction. But importantly for us, there was a big emphasis on lifelong learning and the ability to learn throughout life and the skills that are required for that. And then Sue Olney talked to us about the value of a diverse workforce in regions and really a diverse workforce in the economy, and the risk of a jobless recovery and what kind of impact that would have. And that there is the potential for marginalised in our community to be locked out of work as a result of this COVID pandemic. And I think that's something a lot of us have been turning our attention to. I also wanted to just highlight some of the research that Skilling the Bay commissioned and working with Management Governance Australia, Bernadette and her local team, which looked at the past decade and the transition of Geelong from a traditional manufacturing-based economy to a more diverse knowledge-based economy, and some of the findings that came out of that work, and looking at the challenges and opportunities ahead. So some of the challenges and opportunities included a changing industry profile over the past decade. There's been a huge shift in terms of the largest employment sectors in our region, with health and community services now sitting at the top in terms of the largest employer, but also the proportion of small, medium enterprises that operate in our region. And I think micro and small businesses account for around 36% of businesses, while 3% of businesses in our region are employ between 20 to 200 plus employees. So there's much more diverse mix of organisations within the region than perhaps what we realise. And that, of course, means that we need a new education and skills mix to cater for that diverse workforce. Some of the other challenges that were highlighted in that research include the impact of digital disruption, automation, and the changing nature of work itself, the rise of the gig economy, and we've seen, I suppose, the impact of that in terms of the precarious nature of work for some people in our economy, with regard to casualised workforce and a portfolio of work, if you like. Yes, there are some benefits and it can be incredibly flexible and challenging, but also it can be precarious. And that, extrapolating that out, the research showed that up to 75,000 jobs in our region could be impacted by digital disruption and automation by 2030. And of course, I think we've probably seen that COVID will exacerbate this. There are some challenges around the reduction of entry-level jobs and routine jobs, as I mentioned, and challenges facing our young people with higher than average unemployment ranging from 11% to 20% in some of our more vulnerable communities. And the number of people living at or below the poverty line was pre-COVID 35,000 people within our region. So, we're expecting that number to increase, and many people finding themselves living below the poverty line for the first time. Added to these challenges, in a post-COVID environment, we have significant impacts on the health and well-being of our community, increased numbers of families accessing social services for food relief and family violence assistance. we have seen rising unemployment levels, and I think between February to June, there was an estimated 10,000 people added to the job seeker numbers in our region, and that doesn't include the job keeper figures, which that will emerge in time as the job keeper program concludes. And with fluctuating COVID restrictions, we've actually seen an impact to employment across all sectors within our region, and that includes healthcare and social assistance, which has had a reduction of 1,000 jobs, and overall employment dropped by 6.2%. So there's some pretty significant challenges there, but I suppose the conversation today we want to have is, what can we do to support recovery? And we've made some assumptions about the need for a diverse regional economy with employment opportunities across the spectrum of low, medium and highly skilled jobs. And we think that's going to be as important as ever. But more importantly, how do we identify the skills and the pathways into those jobs so that we can benefit from sustainable and decent employment? So probably left you with a bit of a leading question there, Clive.
Lovely, thank you. I think you've summed it up pretty well. It's a precarious situation we're in for a lot of people. So we thought we'd start the first part of the discussion just by talking about entry-level skills. And when we think about the transition into the workforce, I made reference the other day when we were talking about this to a presentation that Bernard Salt made to the committee a few years ago. He's a demographer who's quite well known, and he talked about the changing way of work, meaning that there would be a large proportion of people that would be in and out of work during their career. But he talked about underlying skills that were necessary for all workers, for those workers to be regularly employed, that they needed to have good problem-solving skills, they needed to have good interpersonal skills, and on top of that, they obviously had to have a base skill or knowledge. The question is, well, as we look at our young people coming into the workforce, how are we preparing those young people with those skills, interpersonal and problem solving, on top of the technical skills that we're developing? And how would that help them in terms of their entry into the workforce? So we're going to throw that open to discussion when we talk entry-level skills and seek some input and comment from the audience here today. So we're going to look for a volunteer. If we don't get one, I'm going to have to move the mouse randomly across the screen and pick one. So who'd like to have a crack at answering that question about entry-level skills? I can't see anyone putting their hand up yet. Carley, how do we do that?
They're all shy, I think, Clive. Anthony just raised his hand there.
Anthony, you go first. You give it a crack.
Well, I think Carley might remember me from being out at Ford for a long time. So depends on when you're talking about entry-level skills and what type of skills you're after. If you're actually looking for the soft skills and all the rest of it, then it becomes a question mark over what the education process actually is in the entry part of school and all the rest of it, or what you're actually wanting them to lead into. But if you're looking for other skills to be able to communicate and all the rest of it, I think that's still something lacking that's probably in the school itself. But there's also the interaction of, and I've been saying this for a long time, that when the technical schools disappeared, the ability for kids of all gender to be able to utilise their hands and to be able to communicate a little bit different to other schools. If you were looking at what's sort of like a college base now, it's more technical in a book, whereas the other ones were more communication and you actually had more hands-on. And so that's something that I don't know how you're going to bring back, because a lot of them are actually stuck in books.
What are you?
That's a start.
So those people that taught trade skills, when you think back to those times, how would you rate their ability to be natural communicators in terms of the way they went about doing their work?
I think that I came from a tech school in a sense. So I came from sort of both lots of schools. And so one would think that in the communication was totally different compared to what I've seen in from a tech school to a private school to a Catholic school and all the rest of it. What I've seen is it's different in the way that education is actually taught. Because at tech school, you were actually more, the teachers were more discussion, whereas personally from a Catholic school, you were actually more in the books. You actually were more getting educated for office type jobs and not necessarily from the floor. So I've had this conversation in the past about the different type of what you're aiming the kids to be going for determines what type of education they may actually be given, is the hard part.
Good observation. When we look at where the majority of people are employed in Geelong currently, there's principally three sectors, I think, Carley. One is retail, one is construction, and the other is healthcare. They're the three predominant employers as we sit here today. So who'd like to pick up on those comments and just add to that discussion around entry-level skills education? Anyone want to challenge Anthony on his comments or expand on those?
Hi, Clive. I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, Lindy, go ahead.
I think it's just really important to expand further around Carley's earlier point about how some of the industries where people would traditionally get their first job, such as retail or hospitality for young people. And I think that those industries are perhaps ones in our region that are going to take a long time to recover from COVID and perhaps never will. So there may well be a couple of years of young people who are going to really struggle to get that first job and that first experience. So I'm not sure what we could maybe pick up on in education to try and help with that. Things like work placement, work experience have been extremely difficult this year, and they probably are going to continue to be next year and potentially ongoing as well. So yeah, just a comment there, and how we might be able to work on that, if you like.
Yep, great points, Lindy, in terms of the importance of those experiences for young people. I wonder if some of the educators might want to talk about that and the impact that having those experiences has on building those entry-level skills. They've all gone silent.
Pretty sure when I went to school, there wasn't much of that except what we learned at home. I remember it's interesting, Anthony, talking about tech schools, because I had my brother-in-law went to Geelong Tech, and he has a bunch of mates that he's still friends with today, and they've all gone on to have quite different but very, very successful careers based around having learned a base skill, or they've moved into out of their base skill, they've moved into management type roles or aligned roles based around their base skills. So for example, one guy that started off as a laboratory technician merged into becoming a health and safety specialist based around application on the job skills. But I really think it always sticks in my mind that people sort of had this association that you had to go into a trade, but really they've been able to apply their skills across a number of different sectors with success. And I don't know, I find it a really interesting one to reflect upon that area. Phil, I know you're dying to have your say. I don't know when we're going to invite you in to do that, but just give us a quick recap on PTEC's experience around how you provide those entry-level skills in your program.
Well, I'm not chomping at the bit, believe it or not, but however, the aspects that we're trying to pursue here as part of PTEC and other initiatives, because PTEC is a component part of a range of different programs and offerings that all contribute to I suppose, or try to contribute to a collective. In that, the students won't gain soft skills or broader skills unless they're explicitly taught, and they have to either be exposed to them through their home life and broader experiences, or school, or both. And my take on that is that we should design curriculum to include them, but design experiences in school whereby they can see how the world of work operates in a real sense, through placements, through opportunity for mentoring, through a range of other exposures to both workplaces and tertiary institutions that then give them an opportunity to be more informed about their own future, while at the same time learning the sorts of skill sets that employers are telling us loud and clear that they value, that they do want an individual to have a skills, whatever their base skill is in a particular area, their knowledge base or their technical hand-on skills. They need those, but they also, in a broader sense, need the capacity to interact, to collaborate, to work with others, to problem solve, to have interpersonal skills that are really strong, and to recognize where they're placed in the world of work. And that may happen in many households through exposure to different settings, through the experiences of parents and aunties and uncles and the broader community, but in many households it won't. And so what we feel here is that we're better placed actually trying to create an environment where we explicitly teach those types of skills and provide the opportunities where students can be exposed to them both in tertiary institutions and in the world of work, whatever that looks like. And as far as that boils down, it almost then ends up like an individual careers and program discussion with an individual kid.
Mm. Yeah, it's a tough area, that, isn't it? As to those that naturally have the opportunity to do it versus those that don't. And I really love your the comment about the incorporation into curriculum, because that's such a difficult space to influence, but one that's extremely necessary.
Yep.
I'm going to handball the next section to you. I think we're going to talk about reskilling, and or is that me still? No, upskilling. Sorry.
Thanks, Clive. I was just actually going to query one thing in terms of the group's kind of experience, whether employability skills, soft skills, or interpersonal skills really resonates with you, and in terms of integrating that either into the curriculum or I know in the vet sector we talk about it as employability skills. You know, in the old HR days, we talked about soft skills and interpersonal skills. And I just wondered, does that resonate with people in industry and amongst the group, or do we need to think about it differently? And you may want to pop that in the chat. In terms of upskilling, so we're interested to understand what we need to focus on in terms of upskilling within workplaces at the moment, and thinking about some of the disruptive technologies. What are the areas that you think we need to be focused on in terms of upskilling people, and what role does the education sector, education and skills sector, actually play in that? I might ask Yasmin to maybe make a couple of comments there now that you've finished your lunch, Yasmin. But just in terms of the work that you've been doing with different industries and some of the roundtables that you've been having in terms of discussing what kind of skills they're looking to upskill in their workforces.
Yeah, sure, Carley. Look, I think it's been interesting over the last 12, 18 months, some of the industry discussion or advisory workshops that we've connected with. The driver has been because quite a number of our course packages are going through transition. which opens up that opportunity for us to realign what we're offering there to students to ensure that they get educated to come out the other end with skills that are going to feed directly into what the industry is looking for. So as much as it's a mammoth amount of work, it's a really great opportunity to get industry connected at the beginning and go along that journey. And look, every package has a different driver, but universally there's some key points out of that, which I think fall back into what you were just talking about, Carley, with enterprise skill or the soft skills. It's the ability for people to be able to connect and collaborate, to explore, to have that critical analysis or thinking, to be able to query and to not be disappointed about being questioned or, all that problem solving. And I think at the end of it, with upskilling people, it's about just being able to provide that confidence, I think, in those students in that workforce that they can actually do it. So it's almost not like trying too hard to make it happen. It ends up being part of that process of the transition between education and work. And I think I've heard it just recently, there's that work integrated learning, being able to have those pathway or opportunities between the end of formal study and the start of formal work, and to whether it's a matter of having miniature little, skill sets or micro credentials, which, blend directly into whatever that particular position is inside a company. Or whether it's, something that the student does pick up right at the end of their study. I mean, I have seen other institutions actually overlay above and beyond the actual core course, another level of sort of skill development where students are getting connected in from totally different areas to work together, learn together, and explore and build up that confidence. I think the other key thing is to have inside the workforce people who are educated to be those mentors, because you're never going to learn unless you've got someone there to empower that. And I think we picked up on that earlier within schools. For students to be able to learn this, it's got to be embedded inside their curriculum, and they have to have it demonstrated to them, particularly if they're not going to be having that experience from inside the family unit. So and we're all the same, we continue learning all the way through. So somewhere along the line, we need to have people who've got people who've learnt along the way, had the experiences to be able to filter that down. It's almost like a bit of succession planning, generational knowledge, being able to pass that down. And I think that generational experience of knowing how to upskill people and collaborate together is going to be the key essence to making it work. I might have just rattled on too much there, but I'm just trying to think holistically how we're approaching it with some of our course development. We are actually at the cusp of, with a number of our courses, thinking of embedding some of these skill sets somewhere and make them universal so as we can overlay them or bolt them on across a whole heap of different courses, whether you are, in engineering, where naturally a lot of students might be thinking in that vein, right down to someone who might be in a business area.
That's great, Yasmin. No, thank you. You've actually touched on so many different aspects that we could go down. There's a couple there. One around the universal kind of skill sets or the underpinning skills that might actually sit across a range of diverse industries and sectors, but also the role of mentors in terms of upskilling people or providing people with that essential experience and the coaching. And just thinking back to the conversation before about some people who don't have the opportunities that perhaps we might take for granted in terms of access to networks or individuals or work experience opportunities. And I'm thinking of Lynn Morgan, you and the work that you do at Northern Futures. in terms of mentoring your participants, and also the work that you do with the industry, and then the mentoring that they provide. And I just wondered if you might like to make some comments on that, Lynn. Oh, you're just on mute.
Okay, I'm not going to be quite as intelligent sounding now that I've taken it off mute. Mentoring is really key for a lot of people who just come from, you know, a background where they're under-resourced and where everyone's doing the best that they can, but the opportunities haven't been there. And in particular for people who just are living in survival mode, and the other people that are the voices speaking into their lives are also living in survival mode. So everybody doing the best they can, but just not having the ability to offer, this is what work is like, this is what they expect, this is how to fit in. And so a lot of what Northern Futures does is to make up for that, I guess, through mentoring, case managing, but also we've had employers who said to us, can you please help us understand how to support people, because we're not sure we know how to. We're not sure we know, you know, the best way to speak to people. We might accidentally kick them to the curb and not realise why, because you're focused on the work and it's all about just getting things done. But young people in particular, who speak a little bit of a different language sometimes, inexperienced young people who don't have many outlets where they're networking, can certainly get themselves into trouble without actually meaning to. And in a former role, I was managing 12 young people a year who had some form of barriers to employment, and even just the language was interesting, in that the boss might say, would you like to do this afternoon? And the young person would say, well, no, not really. Have you got something else? They didn't realise, no, this is the language we speak here. This is me telling you this is what you're doing. So there was no malice involved. It's just complete oblivion to how to work together. And I guess some of those fitting in with people and getting the confidence that you matter, you're just as important as anyone else, and your confidence and especially confidence to speak up, because you've got fresh eyes and you know, you can help us with things if you value your own opinion, I guess. So mentoring is really key.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, Clive, did you?
Oh, I was going to make the comment that I think sometimes we might need young people to come and mentor the older people around learning how to change their language, but that's perhaps a conversation for a different day. Looks like we sparked some little bit of debate around the value of emotional intelligence, and whether or not, I don't think we're arguing that it's important, we're just arguing to the extent to which at an interview stage, whether or not we actually test for that. Because it's often that area of soft skills that we see people not succeeding in their role. Their technical skills can be great, but you know, can they always use their soft skills of communication, engagement, collaboration to the extent that the organisation wants that to happen? So feel free to keep feeding some different thoughts in the chat there.
Clive?
Yes, who's that? Anthony, let's go ahead.
I'm not used to, I've got to catch up with the kids with the auto stuff. But so again, coming back to your soft skills and all the rest of it, and we talk about mentors and all the rest of that stuff. Again, coming from school, most of that was taught probably from Form 1, which now shows my age, or also Year 7. So a lot of the kids that came through also didn't have a lot of video games and all the rest of it. So some employers are going to like the video games because it's technical, but the interaction between the kids after school and mucking around together and all the rest of it is slightly different to, say, when I grew up. And so those ability to interact with one another and to be able to actually have conversations and all the rest of it as you're growing up, a part of that's been lost. And so one would think that from year 7 onwards, you would want to be able to try and mentor or then give them an opportunity to show them what the world is from year 7 onwards, but to give them a hands-on feel and so that they actually understand what path they want to go down. That's something that I see that a lot of the younger kids today that I talk to that are around about 17, 18, still haven't actually mapped out their future yet. And they're not sure what they want to do. And so, again, for me personally, again, when you came through, you actually got around sort of GISTA stuff from a lot of the teachers back then. A lot of that now has been sort of calmed back into certain streams of education and whatever else. It's not the same, personally.
Thanks, Anthony. I think there's a couple of points we could actually pick up on in that conversation there, in terms of, one, how do we help young people to aspire to future work and careers, but also what are the underpinning skills? And I know there's a couple of people here who could talk to us about their experience with some young people as well, in terms of we've talked about the soft skills and the importance of those, but what about some of those other more concrete, 21st century skills? And I'm probably looking at you there, Mim, working in the tech school, and also thinking maybe Jude might want to pipe in after that. But Mim, would you like to make a couple of comments about the work in the tech school and what you're seeing in terms of the skills that people need to either upskill, because I'm guessing you've got some observations about that as well. And that could be around teachers and how we're upskilling our teachers to teach 21st century skills and other key competencies.
Interesting. This conversation is very much reflective of a kind of big staff meeting we had recently around what is the kind of core. I mean, our core business is building capacity in schools with the students and with the teachers, and thereby the students, obviously. But soft skills is something that is core to all of our programs, and soft skills is also just a term I'm using now, but we were actually trying to identify more clearly what is more specific and unique to us as the Geelong Tech School, as distinct, Anthony, from the previous tech schools, not the same name, a different kind of iteration. I would have loved to go to one of the old type of tech schools personally, I think. But this is what we have. This is where I'm working. This is an interesting place to be. In answer to your question, I did write to Carley. I mentioned the World Economic Forum produced its new vision for education. This was a few years ago. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and it identified the 21st century skills. And I was answering to Carley one of her questions before about what skills are important, and like it's the question on our lips at the moment. Yes, we are teaching technology, emerging technology skills, but what we're really just teaching entry level kind of technology skills here at the tech school, and and I say that in a very broad sense, because technology encompasses a whole lot of things that we do not engage with, or that we do not undertake, mainly because those things are already taking place, and we don't want to be doing something that's already happening. We want to be trying to bring something new and emerging is the idea. And yes, no soft skills are not easy, Clive, but I, through our own discussion here, and I just brought it up to Carley, was just I found the World Economic Forum's identification of there's a foundational different literacies, and where we've got literacy, numeracy, scientific, ICT, financial is probably a big one that is lacking literacy, and then cultural and civic. And that's kind of where traditional school curriculum is bearing the brunt of the responsibility in those literacies. But the competencies, I think Phil mentioned this before, and also this morning he mentioned the capabilities in the curriculum, and I piqued my interest because that was something I'm thinking a lot about, or we're thinking a lot about here. The capabilities that are identified in the curriculum seem to be a bit tokenistic in that they're there, but they're not being applied, or it's difficult. There's so much put upon schools and teachers to do that, but then there's I don't know if it was Phil or someone else mentioned there is, I think it was Ian who was moderating this morning, who mentioned there's just so much put upon schools and teachers. And being a teacher myself, I feel like I can identify with that when I was in a traditional school setting. It's just like we're trying to do everything and trying to cover not just those foundational literacies, but the competencies of critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and then there's all the qualities. And I mean,
it's a crowded curriculum.
It's crowded, yeah. So I guess I've now attended to a few different things that I kind of was thinking this morning, and then wanting to say, and then trying to answer your question, Carley. But the 21st century skills, as identified by the World Economic Forum, it's like 4 years ago, it's 2016 report. Seems to me is a good place to start to identify some key skills, and whether they're soft or whether, and talking about emotional intelligence, the report literally is titled "The New Vision for Education, Fostering Social and Emotional Learning Through Technology." It doesn't say emotional intelligence, but it's in that vein. I think it's a good place. I've been trying to put forward with my colleagues. I think it's a good place for us to start in terms of identifying our key offerings. But yeah.
Thank you, Mim. That is a great.
That was a ramble. Sorry.
No. I think you're very passionate about the work that you do there, and I know the quality of the work that you and your team are providing there. I was actually just going to link to Jude Walker, because I know you've got some fantastic research experience, but also some observations about the ability of schools and industry to support this type of learning ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Carley. From my point of view, I think there are two really critical areas that are either not being addressed at all or are being way underdone. And none of this is a criticism of the schools themselves, because I know how hard they work and how overloaded they are with everyone wanting their bit pushed into the curriculum. But given the situation we have now in youth suicide and bullying, I think it would be a wonderful thing if schools could partner with families. And I mean, this is all airy-fairy. There would be a lot of working out how to do some of these things. But helping young people learn who they are and being able to appreciate who they are in themselves, and being able to appreciate that other people are different, and that's all fine as well. I think we take kids into school and immediately start loading them up with a whole lot of knowledge. And in this day and age with computers, in a lot of cases, they don't need the knowledge. They just need to know where to find it when they need it. So I think, we could spend a lot more time with kids exploring what their values are, what their aspirations are, what they're good at, what they could still become good at, a whole range of those self things that let them understand who they are as an individual and where they sit within the community and within the globe. And I think if we did that, we could find a lot more cross-pollination between the different cliques that you see in schools, and people being able to actually appreciate themselves and each other. So that's one thing. The other thing is the perennial problem of how do we better connect industry and education. And I think if we started off with pathways right from primary school, by the age of 8, boys and girls are already deciding what boys do and what girls do, and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And that's pretty frightening, because they're already boxing themselves into tiny little areas without exploring what the big wide world holds for them. So if we could set up a system where they're doing real world learning, project-based learning, where they're going into businesses, where businesses are coming into schools, where they're using the minds of young people to explore problems that existing management hasn't been able to deal with, because those kids will bring an entirely different perspective. And a lot of it is going to be way out there and maybe not right now, but the opportunities for that bonding of older workers and young people would, I think, pay tremendous dividends to both industry and education. So rather than tying schools down with this massive curriculum that needs to be taught, and I think it was Nim who said just before that, you know, a lot of those underpinning capabilities that are absolutely critical for people to focus as a member of the community get paid lip service to, because there's so much other stuff that has to be assessed and measured and whatever. And I think we need to take kids on a journey of self-exploration and world exploration, so that they can find where their fit is and how they'd like to live in the world in the future.
Thanks very much, Pugh. Very, very well put, as always. I'm wondering what industry, I know we've got a couple of people who work within business, but I'll hand over to Clive, because I know we are going to a bit of a schedule and conscious of time.
No, I think you've done okay to lose the schedule. It means we probably morph the next two sessions together, which is actually related directly to your question around what's industry's role in that. Because so I'm a person who works, I like the term vocation rather than industry, because industry sometimes has different connotations. But when we talk about what employers are looking for from people around their base skills, it's not often the first thing that we're there for. And I'm interested in the question to those that are in business on this call today. What stops you in terms of having that level of engagement with young people to help build an understanding of vocation? We hear a lot talked about work experience and the difficulty of getting a large number of young people into vocational experience that is of value. But as industry people, as employers, what stops us from doing that? Who'd like to have a crack at that question? No one. Gee, I don't know. We're going to have to pick on someone again. Come on, Brett, see if you can give me a crack as to what stops industry engaging further with people around building vocation.
Nothing's really stopping them except for their own time and effort, really. I think, in the industry that I'm currently working in, which is the waste industry, there's not a lot of young people that are actually interested in coming across to the nitty-gritty of the waste industry to understand how it works. There's a lot of interest in recycling and that sort of industry. I think there's no reason why industries shouldn't be approaching young people. I think they just need to put more weight on investing in people, getting them in to learn. And I think that's probably more of an education for industry rather than young people themselves. I think, more weight needs to be put onto industries to take the time and effort. I guess there's no real incentive for a lot of businesses to do it. And I think that might be what's stopping some industries from, or businesses from, investing in young people and the time it takes to spend with them. I personally take a lot of school groups through our composting facility and engaging with the young people, and it's not difficult and it's very rewarding. I think it's more about educating the industry people, the industry bodies, to encourage people to do things like work experience. And, you know, going back to the topic earlier that we were talking about, you know, if you go back, you know, a couple of decades, people sort of had one job or one industry, and that's all they did, and that was the pathway you chose. Whereas now, even myself, you know, you can have multiple careers, but it's also understanding that the skills that you learn in one industry or one career is absolutely transferable across to the other one. So for myself, you know, I started in retail when I was at university, and then I took those skills that I learned from there, and then I went into consulting with educational publishers, and then working in a publishing house for educational publishing. And now I'm working in the waste industry. You know, all those skills are transferable, and you're just constantly learning along the way with everything you change. And I think that's a mindset that I think a lot of young people are starting to realize is, you know, they don't know what they want to do, but you got to start on the journey. You try something, if it doesn't work out, it's okay to fail effectively. You go, oh, all right, I don't like that skill, I'm going to chop and change. And I think, yeah, industry should also, you know, be working with individuals to encourage that, you know, encourage them to give it a go. If you don't like a particular job, is there something that they can train you with or move you along to within the industry or within, you know, its contacts? I'm waffling now, so I'll stop.
No, you're okay. That's I think it's an interesting question there around the role of the recruiter. I think Carley might have touched on it before. She mentioned, or someone mentioned, HR. And often the role of the recruiter now is to get paid the commission for finding the best person to fill a role. And I wonder if we've lost a little sense of the HR aspect of recruiting when we're looking at bringing people in, but that's perhaps a different conversation. When we talk about, interesting though, Brett, you touch on building career and what the future of work is, because I think that's a massive challenge. We're not likely to go back to having large-scale employers employing large numbers of people. So when we think about Geelong and you know, the large industrial companies such as Ford and Alcoa that were employing thousands of people in our community, and in fact they provided career because they were able to do on-the-job training, they were able to upskill within the workplace, and they were able to provide long-term sustainable careers. And it's a real concern of mine as to how we build employment for larger groups of people in our economy going forward. And I think that what you're touching on when you start about building career now is the necessity for people to be flexible in terms of what they do. And that's you know, the job that you go into today is not the job that you'll be into at the end of your career, but how do you sustain that so you're continuously in employment? That's a massive challenge. Who wants to have a crack at that question about building career? Any other insight around what Brett was talking about?
Clive, I could have a little go. Yes, because I just, I really liked what you were touching on, Brett, there, because as much as it's about the individual or the student wanting to be adaptable to the skills and the job and so forth, and if you're looking at a career journey, then, you know, you're going to be looking at transferring skills or and so forth. It's reverse articulation as well. The employer needs to understand how they're going to adapt to that and have understand their workforce coming in like that. Because I think just observing out there, when you have traditional industries that have a workforce that has been there for a while and you start to interject it with newer blood, then you end up with quite a generational distance between some of those employees. And this could be something that needs exploring to improve. So as you gain the best benefit out of newer, younger recruits coming in to organisations which have the more, I guess, traditional, or maybe not traditional is a word, but having people that have been within the industry or company for a while. And so as you can shrink that gap and you can you know, distill knowledge down, and also pick up new skills that the newer people bring into the company. And I think then that builds up confidence. It gets people to adapt a lot more smoothly and quicker. And also it makes that company more nimble for when they move on and they decide maybe this isn't for me, or look, I'm looking for other opportunities, so I want to leave. And then that company knows then that it can then, you know, re-employ other people in just the same way. So I think it goes both ends. It's not just all from the student's perspective or the younger person. It comes backwards as well.
You're on mute, Clive.
Has to happen once in the conversation, doesn't it? I think that we talked before, Carley talked about the stats in Geelong, that a large number of employers in Geelong are actually employing less than 2 people. So a lot of self-employed people, a lot of people contracting. And I think that what you're articulating there is a big challenge for employers, because they don't have the corporate structures to support some of that development. And I think what you're talking about in terms of us providing education to industry is a really good point as to how we support those. We often talk about the programs to upskill people, but we don't talk about necessarily the program to teach a company to onboard new people. And I think that's a particular challenge that faces not only those coming into the workplace, but also those who are already there. So I think what you're talking about there is a really interesting point. So, Carley, we're almost in the last 5. Well, we are in the last 5 minutes. We were going to try and articulate or ask the discussion around, well, what does our preferred future look like based around what we've talked about today? Carley, are you prepared to have a crack at summarising the top 3?
I can have a crack, Clive, but I was also going to encourage people to put things in the chat function as well. Any ideas that you have based on the discussion. We've covered so much territory. I think the last topic we started to get to around looking at the pipeline into and out of work, what does that look like, and how do we value the skills of people who've been in the workplace for a long time, and how do we impart that knowledge? So we talked about mentoring back in the early part of our conversation. I think that's just as important in this regard. So how do we take those strengths that people have, and how do we encourage people to learn from those strengths? But also, how do we ensure that we're not leaving people behind in the labour market and in the jobs that we create? We know we've got challenges here, and we've talked about the importance of creating and highlighting those pathways into opportunity. And I think the importance of being able to foster those soft skills, those employability skills or enterprise skills, and providing people with the opportunities to practice them and build on them. I mean, Brett, your employment journey, that is a great example of how we take skills and build on them from one job to another, if you've got the right mindset. And I suppose the concern we have is, what if you never got the opportunity for that first job? How, or the second one, how would you build on that? So that's a big challenge for us, but fantastic discussion. And of course, some of the constraints or challenges within the education sector itself, and that schools or an education institute can't do it on its own. You know, not one organisation can do it on its own, and really takes collaboration to do that. So that's my crack at it, Clive.
I think you've done a very good job. So, Carley, I think we're at the end of our 1 hour together. Bernadette, is that when I start to wrap up and say thank you to all of those who joined us today and participated and contributed? It's not easy having a collaborative discussion on Zoom, as you know, but again, anybody who has any thoughts post today's session, please reach out to, or you can go back to Bernadette or to Holly at the Committee for Geelong, and we're happy to incorporate people's comments into the meeting summaries that we prepare. Outside of that, there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more still to go in the future of work discussions for this week. Bernadette, do you want to have the last 15 seconds?
Thank you very much, Clive, and thank you, Carley, and thank you everyone who's here. Pat, I'm wondering with your hand up whether you're happy to type your question into chat as we close out. The comment about we need time and effort to do things, I think, is that piece of the commitment piece. We need to commit time and effort as well to solve some of these problems. And I had a lot of scribbled notes. One of them was that I think every 5 years I say to myself, what will I be when I grow up? And I feel like coming away from today and saying, what will I be when I grow up? That journey that we take in our working lives was really evident today through the discussion that each of us is twisting and turning and shifting our spaces through the working lives that we have. I really look forward to joining everyone on tomorrow's conversations, I hope, and Thursdays, and then our closing session on Friday, where our final 10-minute guest speaker will actually talk about doing things a little bit differently, about presenting opportunities for young people to understand work. So a very practical, on-the-ground experience. Thank you. A little bit longer than 15 seconds, Clive. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Good job. Thank you. And we'll see you down the track. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Obviously, we're staying on for the post program.
Yeah, that was good, guys, wasn't it?
Oh, thanks. I think we got a lot of discussion. It's not easy, Clive, is it?
It's like going down a racetrack and you sort of start with having to bring people along. I can be careful what I say here because Holly's still recording, but you can edit it out later.
Oh, I'll stop recording, actually. I better stop recording.